Welcome to the Community-Based Instruction Training. My name is Jugnu Agarwal and I'm an Adapted Curriculum Specialist with Fairfax County Public Schools. Community-based instruction is a vital part of the Fairfax County Public Schools instructional program for students with moderate to severe disabilities and some students with mild disabilities. It provides them with opportunities to experience the real world of their communities before reaching adulthood, when their lives will be lived within the communities. FCPS is committed to providing students with disabilities support in setting goals for independent daily life experiences and to creating schools that provide the opportunities to meet these goals in the classroom and in the general community. Today, we are going to define CBI and all of its components. We will be talking about philosophy and framework of CBI, the process, guidelines and procedures, and the supervision of students during CBI. You can access the CBI manual through multiple ways. You can either go to the FCPS 24/7 Adapted Curriculum Blackboard site and you can click on the Community-Based Instruction folder, or you can also access it through the FCPS Adapted Curriculum intranet site. The CBI manual is the same for elementary as well as secondary. Community-based instruction is the means to opening the world to our students in a variety of ways. It makes the world of school a broader experience and helps students become familiar and comfortable in the broader community. These experiences contribute to the development of independence in the students as they practice the critical skills within the natural setting of their community. For some students, the school is their first community setting. Philosophy and framework of CBI. This information can be found on page 4 of your CBI manual. Individuals with intellectual disabilities should be encouraged to set goals for independence and experience life. It is necessary for schools to provide an atmosphere and environment that encourages maximum interaction with non-disabled peers to meet these goals in the school, the home, and the community. Students with mild to severe disabilities need direct instruction in school and community environments if they are to be successful in various settings such as stores, restaurants, job sites, or businesses, in recreational facilities, and in using public transportation. Skill development in the school-based and natural settings will enable students to prepare for independent or semi-independent living and job acquisition. FCPS supports objectives that focus on the development of community skills. Teachers spend time outside the classroom and the school in order to provide appropriate educational experiences for their students. Definition of CBI. The Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA 2004, requires transition planning from school to post-school options as critical part of the individualized education program process for students. Providing opportunities for community-based experiences beginning at the elementary level is a vital part of early education and later transition from school to community-based employment. Instruction in community settings provides opportunities for these students to learn to be community participants to the fullest extent possible. Community-based instruction beliefs stemming from research such as teaching skills that will enable students to live and work in the community environments in which they need to function. Teaching students within community environments, teaching essential age-appropriate skills in the environment in which they occur naturally. Teaching skills in real-world settings in the presence of non-disabled people using naturally occurring materials and situations. On this slide depicts the community learning continuum. Skill development and training for community participation typically begins in the home and school setting. Formal instruction in community skills is initiated and practiced in the structured classroom setting and then the broader school environment prior to introducing instruction in the community. Relevant skills are introduced in the classroom and increasingly taught directly in the actual environment in which they will be used. Specific skills such as delivering messages to the office, changing classes, traveling with a peer to the library or cafeteria, collecting attendance, and waiting in line prepare the student for eventual community independence. Community-based instruction should therefore occur daily. As skills increase and as the student progresses in age, the community expands to increase opportunities for learning in natural environments. Classroom activities could include introduction to CBI trips and the prerequisite skills. School environment could include cafeteria, gym, hallways, main office, auditorium, clinic, etc. School grounds could include school property, playground, game fields, bus stops. Community-based instruction could also be practiced in the streets crossing using public transportation, providing travel training, restaurants, grocery stores, recreation facilities, and job training sites, etc. Is part of an overall curriculum framework for teaching functional life skills. 5 basic skill strands guide the instruction of students in functional life skills. They are essential academics, personal management, recreation and leisure, school and community living, and work-related and career development. 3 essential related skill strands are incorporated into the above 5 curricular areas in order to facilitate generalization of skills and maximize independent functioning for students in both school and community environments. Goals and objectives addressing skills in these areas are frequently embedded into the 5 basic strands to provide context for instruction. These related skill strands are communication, social skills, and motor skills. You can turn to your manual on page 7 and look at the Life Skills Curriculum Framework. This gives examples of the skills that can be developed under the life skills instructional strands. Community-based instruction is an instructional component that is guided by the IEP for each participating student. Classroom teachers are responsible for choosing goals for development in school and community settings in accordance with the IEP procedures. Pages 8 to 11 of your manual give a list of skills that can be considered for development within home, school, and community settings. This list is not inclusive and not intended to be viewed as a curriculum for community instruction. Ideas for community sites are also listed on page 12 of your CBI manual. Direct instruction in natural environments should not be construed as a field trip or any other kind of episodic experience. CBI requires the same amount of preparation as any other instructional component. For each student engaging in CBI, the teacher should have at least the following: specific instructional goals and objectives which are in line with students' IEPs, planned specific teaching strategies, essential and age-appropriate materials, a plan for documentation of student progress. Field trips are designed to provide exposure to real-world events, usually in the local community. They are not necessarily related to the individual student's IEP goals, but are more often designed to reinforce general learning concepts or to increase the child's general knowledge. Field trips usually involve the entire class. Community-based instruction is an ongoing process. Once a student masters an instructional goal, continued practice is needed for maintenance and generalization of the skill across environments. The teacher should always keep in mind that the ultimate objective is for the student to be able to use the skill in the natural environment. CBI should include no more than 2 to 4 students in a group in order to maximize instructional opportunities. Look at the following trips and decide whether it is a CBI or a field trip. Class trip to the zoo. That's a field trip. Visit to post office to mail package is a CBI. Going to cafeteria to order lunch from menu, CBI. Going to see a play at GMU, field trip. Going to the library to locate reference material, CBI. And a class trip to the museum, again field trip. Some of these could go either way, could also be CBI, again depending on the specific goals and objectives and data collection. Best practices for CBI. Educational services of students with disabilities are directed by goals in the IEP that address student-specific needs based on assessments. IEP goals for community-based instruction are written with the understanding that research-based instructional practices will be used in order to achieve positive student outcomes. Quality instruction of students with disabilities should incorporate the following practices: person-centered planning and educational services. Each student's curriculum is developed by a team that includes the student, his or her parents, teachers, and other individuals who have a significant impact on the student's education. Placement, curriculum, supports, and services are based on the student's individual needs and preferences and not on disability category. Age-appropriate materials and activities. Students use materials and participate in activities and classes throughout the school day that are consistent with their same age peers without disabilities. Integrated school and community settings. Instruction is delivered in integrated school and community settings that reflect the least restrictive environment for each student. Students have regular involvement and interaction with non-disabled peers in the school activities, programs, and services. Functional community referenced activities. Instruction focuses on skills that have immediate applicability to the student's life as well as on skills that will allow the students to participate in future settings. Skills are taught across environments within the context of meaningful activities. Skills embedded across the day. Students are actively engaged in learning throughout the entire school day. Instruction on priority skills is interspersed throughout the day so that students have multiple opportunities to practice new skills and apply them across different settings. Immediate application of skills. Community skills targeted for instruction should be immediately usable. That is, acquisition of even the first component of the skill should immediately enable the student to participate more fluidly in a community environment with family or friends. As the student becomes more proficient, skill demands become more complex and environments for use broaden, making way for future independence in the community. Participation and independence. Each student is encouraged to and assisted in participating in learning activities to the maximum extent possible. Instruction utilizes partial participation strategies and promotes independence within each activity and class. Best practices continued. This information can be found in pages 17 to 20 of your CBI manual. Systematic instruction. The use of task analysis, prompting, and prompt trading techniques, reinforcement strategies, and an ongoing data collection occur throughout the day across instructional settings. Systematic procedures are implemented to ensure skill acquisition, maintenance, and generalization. Systematic instruction practices are documented in writing and used consistently by all staff members to promote student learning. Positive behavioral supports. Positive behavior approaches are used to manage students who exhibit challenging behaviors. Proactive and reactive response strategies are designed by a team and are based on the results of a functional behavioral assessment. Methods for addressing challenging behaviors are person-centered, socially acceptable within the student's culture, and driven by the function of student's behavior. Positive behavior approaches include direct instruction to teach alternative or replacement behaviors, systematic reinforcement plans, and assessment of the effectiveness of planned interventions. Interaction with typical peers. Regularly scheduled opportunities are provided for students to participate in activities with their same age peers who do not have disabilities. Interactions among students with and without disabilities are promoted through the use of collaborative activities and heterogeneous groupings of students. Assistive technology. Appropriate technology, as determined by each student's educational team, exists to support the student at home, at school, and in the community. The technology is accessible across environments and is used to increase the student's independence and level of participation in daily activities. Use of visuals. Visual strategies are an essential component in the instruction of students with limited cognitive and communication abilities. Visuals include, but are not limited to, actual items, photographs, line drawings, and board maker symbols. Examples of effective visual supports are included in your manual. Transition planning across levels and from school to adulthood. A sending and receiving team, which includes the student and his or her parents, teachers, and other individuals who have a significant impact on the student's education, develop and implement a plan to ensure that the services and supports that the student needs will be available at the next school level and upon completion of school. Preparing for CBI is as important as the actual trip. Teachers should be preparing the students for the trip long before the day of the trip. Think about how you will begin preparing the students for the CBI trip. Think about who will take the students, what they will teach them, where they will be going, what they will be doing, and what is needed, etc. Consider the need for pre-travel instructional activities that are used to enhance the instructional value of the community-based activity. Also consider the importance of individualizing these skills based on current strengths and needs based on each student. You can reference pages 18 and 19 in your CBI manual for examples of pre-travel activities. An ecological inventory is an instrument to gather critical information regarding current or subsequent environments and those skills necessary for success in these environments. Ecological inventories should be conducted in each environment. The steps in implementing the strategy are as follows. Confer with the parents and significant others in order to identify current and future environments in which the student spends or will spend his or her time. Visit these environments for the purpose of identifying the skills needed to function in them. Identify the sub-environments in the mall, but where in the mall specifically would the students go? Identify the activities that occur within each of these sub-environments. Identify the skills needed in order to engage in these activities. Determine which skills the student can perform and which ones he or she cannot. Prioritize with the parents and others the skills that the student needs to acquire. Select skills for instruction with parents and others. If necessary, conduct a task analysis assessment in order to identify the component part of the skills that the student can and cannot perform. Design and implement an instructional program for the teaching of the skills. You may not be the person taking the student out. You can reference the Appendix A on pages 3 to 10 of the CBI manual for the complete ecological survey. Consider the following factors when developing goals based on the ecological survey and other student information. Frequency. How often will the student use the skill? Level of independence. If the student does not learn the skill, will someone else have to do it for him or her? Age appropriateness. Is the skill age appropriate for the student? Is this something a typically developing peer would do? Generalization. Does the skill have to be contrived in school or other settings for training purposes? For example, making a bed at school is contrived since the student is actually not sleeping in the bed at school, as compared to teaching money skills in the cafeteria or a restaurant, which are not contrived since those are the natural settings where money is actually used. Natural consequences. Does the reinforcement for performing the skill have a natural relationship to the skill itself? For example, when a student asks for juice and receives juice versus a student saying juice and receiving a sticker for good talking. Parent input. Do the parents place a high value on the skill? Parent questionnaires assessed teachers in determining how students function outside the school setting and structure. This type of information from parents is essential to the process of determining appropriateness of the goals for community-based instruction and the student's overall educational plan. Opportunities for interaction. Will acquisition of the skill provide the student with more opportunities to interact with non-disabled peers and or adults? Employability. Is the skill likely to increase the student's opportunities for employment and social acceptability? Will the skill help the student display more conventional social skills? You can reference page 12 of your CBI manual for a list of community environments. Some examples may include community services, a trip to fire or police station to do a unit on safety and learn what an emergency is, how to call 911 for help. Post office could be used for teaching a unit on writing and mailing letters, using vending machines to purchase stamps and mail packages. Library to obtain library card, check out and return books and locate resources. Health and safety, a trip to CVS or a Rite Aid to visit the pharmacy, locate first aid materials, determine what they are used for, identify poisonous versus non-poisonous items. A visit to the hospital to learn about the role of a doctor. Veterinarian, identify how to care for different kinds of pets. For recreation, a visit to recreation center that goes along with a unit on nutrition, exercise and stress management, or a visit to bowling alley. For shopping, going to the grocery store to locate different sections of the grocery store, for example, produce, bakery, meats, etc., and determine what will be found in each section. A visit to a shopping mall, bookstore, nursery or greenhouse, party store, farmer's market, dollar store, pet store, some of the restaurants including food court, as well as fast food establishments. Here are some funding requests that were denied. Wagon rides, charter bus to the zoo, a request to buy a digital camera, end of the year lunch or picnic party, Costco BJ's and making large purchases, and a trip to Staples for classroom supplies. Also think about, is spending $10 at a movie theater a good use of the money for the students? This is an example of a goal in the area of reading life skills that has been adapted to the various areas found on the CBI continuum of instruction. This slide shows how you can use the individual student goal sheet to plan various activities related to a specific skill chosen over different environments on the community learning continuum. Some students might start at different points on the community learning continuum depending on their needs. And see whether you respond to it yes or no. Students should master identified skills within the school environment prior to generalizing them in the community. The answer to this question is yes. It is important for students to master specific skills within the classroom and school environment grounds prior to them going out into the community with the expectation of generalizing these skills independently. Documentation of student performance and progress is an essential part of instruction. CBI requires documentation of skill development through the use of data collection. Many different techniques for data collection can be used during instruction in natural environments, including the following: task analysis, teacher narrative, anecdotal notes and records, event recordings. Number of times a specific event or behavior occurs in a given time period. Duration recording, amount of time the student is on task when performing a given task. Latency recording, recording of the time between the cue and the student's initiation of the task. Levels of support, recording the levels of assistance or interventions necessary to facilitate the student's performance of a task. These forms can be found on the intranet site listed on the bottom of the slide. Teachers should use a form which will target the skill or activities being measured. It is necessary to document each trip out in the community using a data collection form such as those included in the Appendix B of the CBI manual. The next few slides are going to reference procedures and forms that have been developed in order to ensure the safety of students during community travel. These procedures protect the teacher and staff from liability if an unusual event occurs while away from the school campus. Liability is one of the important considerations when planning instructional travel. One of the first questions asked when an emergency situation arises is whether the teacher followed appropriate procedures and exercised good judgment. The standard applied to determining negligence is known as reasonable man. This standard means that under the same or similar circumstances, a reasonable person of ordinary prudence would have conducted him or herself in a way similar to that of a potentially liable person. Thus, the standard of care for teachers providing instruction in the community is that their performance should equal that of other prudent teachers in similar circumstances. Reasonable judgment requires that teachers follow the procedures outlined in this guide and plan instruction carefully and systematically, taking care to anticipate potential problems and potential benefits. Teachers should introduce risks in increments compatible with the student's emerging abilities. For example, systematically using environmental, physical, and verbal cues to teach sidewalk travel or street crossing is both a valid instructional strategy and a necessary safety measure. Forms have been developed in order to ensure the safety of students during community travel. These procedures protect the teacher and staff from liability if an unusual event occurs while away from the school campus. Must be under the direct supervision of staff members at all times during community-based instruction. Do not leave students alone or without the supervision of an FCPS staff member while at community sites. This information can be found on pages 21 and 22 of your CBI manual. Instruction of students should be planned and implemented by the classroom teacher. It is the responsibility of the teacher to provide training and supervision to instructional assistants, student teachers, and volunteers as they prepare to work with students in school or community settings. Public health attendants and volunteers may monitor and work with students at off-school sites under the supervision of any certified teacher or related service clinicians. The following guidelines will help you to make appropriate decisions regarding staff supervision. Teacher is responsible for planning instruction and providing data sheets for each staff member's use, can accompany individual or small groups of students into the community. IA or PHTA may accompany up to 2 students into the community in accordance with the teacher's lesson plan. Instructional assistants may also remain at school with the students to continue classroom instruction at the discretion of the teacher. PHA may accompany up to 2 students into the community under the supervision of a teacher or remain at school under the supervision of a teacher. Therapist, such as physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech pathologist, and vision, itinerant, etc., may accompany 2 students into the community with or without the teacher. They focus on speech and language, physical therapy or occupational therapy goals, and integrated vision or mobility lessons as indicated on the ID. Volunteers such as parent, student, or agency representative generally assist students remaining at school or may accompany the teacher into the community at the discretion of the teacher. The familiarity of the volunteer will influence whether she or he accompanies the students into the community. Substitute for a teacher, instructional assistant, or attendant can participate in community instruction, again at the discretion of the teacher. Often the substitute is a known individual with whom the students are familiar and who is familiar with the overall CBI program. These individuals can easily pick up the CBI plans for the day and carry them out. However, when the substitute is unknown, it is generally better to keep the substitute in the classroom and have the assistants go out with the students if it is essential to continue the CBI for the day. Each site should select a contact person who will arrange with transportation the preferred day and time for community trips. Safety is the most important aspect of travel. Before any student begins to travel within the community, including the school community, travel safety and stranger safety training should be taught. Factors to be considered in assuring a safe learning environment include personal safety lessons taught within classrooms and school environments during the first month of school and before initiating community travel. The number of students traveling to one site, the amount of supervision required to accomplish the goals of training, the level of independence of the students, and any challenging behaviors of students. Students must be under the direct supervision of staff members at all times during community travel. Students should never be left alone or without the supervision of an FCPS staff member while at community sites. Please reference the emergency response procedures on pages 22 to 24 in your CBI manual. The following forms are required for CBI instruction. CBI monthly and quarterly parent permission form for participation. These can be found in Appendix C on pages 45 and 47. Please note that teachers are required to obtain written permission from parents for their child to participate in CBI trips that take place off school grounds. You will obtain signed permission from parents for their child to participate per notification. Teachers have the option of using either monthly or quarterly permission forms. Be sure to note if parents do not give permission for their child to participate in off-site CBI trips, in which case you will need to plan instruction for the student within the school setting. The CBI notification of travel monthly form, which can be found in Appendix C on page 48. If a specific trip was not utilized or was not included in monthly or quarterly plan, teachers are required to complete an additional form, the CBI notification of travel, and submit it to parents prior to initiating travel. This can be found in Appendix C on page 49. Parents must be notified of date and location of travel prior to the trip. This is a screenshot of the community-based instruction monthly parent permission for participation form. This is a screenshot of CBI notification of travel monthly plan. In addition to obtaining administrator's signature on parent permission forms, you must also notify administration of upcoming trips via the CBI community travel log, which can be found on Appendix D of the CBI manual. School administrators must have a record of the travel time, location, and the students who are out of the building prior to the travel. Make sure to report unusual situations during community travel in a timely manner. This is a screenshot of the community travel log that can be submitted to the school administrator, and the office prior to travel. CBI, each school site is required to select a school contact person who will arrange with the special education transportation route supervisor for the preferred day and time for community trips. Responsibility of the school contact person include arranging transportation with the special ed transportation route supervisor for all eligible classes or students at school, preparing a monthly transportation plan to provide to the special education transportation route supervisor and the school office staff. Teachers are expected to follow all stated policies, guidelines, and procedures regarding instructional travel. Consider the following when planning community travel. Community shuttles are limited to travel within a 5-mile radius of the school site. Travel plans should consider locations within the immediate school vicinity in accordance with the policy. Teachers are responsible for notifying parents of all community travel plans prior to the date of the trips. Parent permission for participation in CBI should be on file at school prior to the initiation of travel. The school contact should provide the school administrator and the bus driver and/or route supervisor with a monthly travel plan which includes the community location, students traveling, supervising adults, and the form of transportation. Remember that good planning makes the use of Metro Bus, Fairfax Connector, or Metro Rail system as an excellent form of travel. The following items will assist in making the travel smooth and beneficial to all students. Allow time to walk to the stop. Allow 5 minutes extra because the bus is not allowed to come early and keep going. Have ID ready for reduced fare and bus fare ready. IDs for people with disabilities are made at Metro Center for a nominal fee. Use the stop on the same side of the street as the school or cross at a light. Be familiar with the number of the bus that is needed. Many buses may pass the stop within minutes. Know the alternate bus numbers and/or times in case you miss the bus. This is a yes or no question. Community-based instruction can occur in the school environment as well as within the community. The answer to this question is yes. The continuum of community learning spans from the classroom setting to the school environment to school grounds and eventually out into the community. You may verbally notify administrators of the location of CBI instruction the day of the travel. The answer to this question is no. It is important to provide written notice to administrators in advance of any shuttles leaving the school using the required forms previously stated in the training. Provides the guidelines and procedures for CBI and CWE instruction. This can be found on page 30 of your CBI. Every student should be working on the same goals while participating in community-based instruction. The answer to this question is no. CBI goals should be individualized to consider each student's strengths and needs and developed in accordance with the student's present level as stated in the student's IEP. Reflection from the teacher and the student can serve as data for the CBI. Monitor progress over several trips. Student self-assessment forms are located in Appendix B on pages 24 and 25 of the CBI manual. CBI reports in visual format are located in Appendix B on pages 26, 27, and 28 of your CBI manual. In addition, Appendix B has several data sheets that can be used during CBI trips. CBI leads to an expanded world for students with disabilities, allowing time to explore a variety of life activities, career options, work environments, and increasing personal independence within the naturally occurring environments found in the home, school, and community. Now we will go over the CBI funding procedures. Two reasons for providing secondary students funding for community-based instruction. Funds are necessary to support instruction in community settings. By providing funds to students, they can practice handling money in real-life situations in the community. Consider families within your school that need financial assistance. CBI is an invaluable experience for all students with low incidence disabilities, and students should not be denied the opportunity to go out in the community just because they could not afford the cost. Therefore, all students are provided funds for CBI. This chart outlines the procedures for accessing CBI funds. Each item in the procedures is the responsibility of the classroom teacher and/or lead teacher. The completion of an individual student planning form is the responsibility of the classroom teacher. It must be completed by the classroom teacher and given to their lead teacher no later than October 12th for them to review and submit with the request to encumber funds. When completing this form, please identify any of the students' IEP goals that are relevant and can be addressed during community-based instruction. This form can be found in the CBI manual in Appendix D on page 57, as well as on our FCPS 24/7 learning site and on Adapted Curriculum intranet site. Item number 2 on the required procedures is completion of the request to encumber CBI funds. The lead teacher is responsible for completing this form and submitting it to our office along with the individual student planning forms. Please identify each student by name and student ID number who will be participating in CBI. Lead teachers can write or type the information on this form. At the bottom of the form, there is a place for your administrator to print and sign, indicating that those are the names of the students in their school that will be participating in CBI. Please make sure that the special education administrator's name is clearly printed and is legible. The deadline to submit this form is October 26, 2018. 3 of the procedures provides the deadlines to submit both the individual student planning forms as well as the request to encumber CBI funds forms. All paperwork must be submitted to our office by October 26, 2018. Item number 4 only pertains to CBI trips that will be using CBI funds. If you are taking a walking CBI trip to practice crossing the street, obeying light signals, etc., you probably don't need funds and therefore would not have to worry about step 4 for that trip. However, if you are going to a restaurant to practice making a purchase and will be using CBI funds, then item number 4 applies to you. Prior to going on a CBI trip that requires the use of funds, the classroom teacher will complete the CBI expenditure form and submit it to our office using the Google link for approval of funds. This form should be submitted at least 1 week in advance of the CBI trip. 1 week before a trip, teachers must complete the CBI expenditure form and submit it to Jugdu Agrawal. This form is available online this school year at the following link. Within 3 school days of submitting the CBI expenditure form online, you and your school's finance tech will receive an email indicating if the trip was approved or if additional information is required. Trips are to be planned instructional events, and this form must be submitted again, as I said, at least 1 week prior to the scheduled trip. Once the CBI expenditure form is received, you and your school's finance tech will receive a confirmation via email that your trip is approved. Your finance officer will then provide you with the funds needed for this trip. Please make sure that you are using the form for this year, which will be listed in the title of the form. So please make sure to use the form for 2018 and 2019. The expenditure form can be submitted using the Google link 1 week after the trip has already occurred. The answer to this question is no. CBI expenditure form should be submitted using the Google link at least 1 week prior to the trip. 5. Following the CBI trip, all original receipts should go to your finance tech. They will send copies to our office for reimbursement. Individual receipts for each student is required for reimbursement. Receipts with items for multiple students on one receipt will not be reimbursed. This means each student needs to pay individually for their purchases. For example, whether it is at a restaurant or bowling alley, each student should be paying individually for their items. And please make sure to submit these receipts in a timely manner so that they can be submitted to our office for reimbursement and not wait until the end of the year to submit these receipts. Recap of the procedures. Teachers should complete the individual student planning forms for each student participating in CBI and submit it to your lead teacher. The lead teacher will then complete the request to encumber funds form and submit it to their special education administrator for signature. Then the lead teacher will send the following forms to me at Willow Oaks Administrative Center, Suite 2115, which should include signed request to encumber CBI funds form and copies of CBI individual planning forms. The deadline for submitting these forms is October 26, 2018. Teachers, if the CBI funds are required for a specified trip, complete the CBI expenditure form 1 week prior to the trip. Submit the CBI expenditure form to Jugnu Agrawal, that's me, via Google using the link below at least 1 week in advance. I will review the CBI expenditure forms for funding approval. I will notify you, the teacher, and the school finance staff via email of funding approval status of the CBI trip. After the trip, submit to the finance tech the original receipts and a copy of pre-approved CBI expenditure form. This is the responsibility of the teacher. For prepared meals purchased from grocery stores, etc., try to get the tax exemption. If you are unable to get the tax exemption for prepared meals, then while submitting the receipts for reimbursement, please ensure that tax is included in the total amount requested for reimbursement. All students should have paid for their items individually and have an individual receipt. Group receipts will not be reimbursed. Also, if there is a tip involved, it needs to be clearly listed on the receipt and labeled. Can this receipt be reimbursed? The answer to this question is no, because this is not an individual student receipt and it also doesn't list the individual items that were purchased for this CBI. Reimbursement request must be received by me no later than May 31st, 2019. However, I would highly encourage you to submit your receipts for reimbursement right after your trips and not wait until the end of the year to get reimbursed.
Good afternoon. I am Sue Eaton. I'm the work-based learning resource teacher with Career and Transition Services. Now that you have a clear understanding of CBI, let's talk about Community Work Experience, or CWE. We'll begin by discussing the difference between CBI and CWE. Community work experience is the type of instruction that takes place in cooperating businesses in the community that allows students to train in real work settings and to acquire appropriate work behaviors. CBI as a whole, the community is accessed as an environment where your student can work on independent living skills. CWE, the business community, is accessed as a real work environment where your students can work on vocational and career training. I'm going to provide you with an overview of CWE as well as highlight some information that's available to you on the CTS or Career and Transition Services website. At the end of the PowerPoint, we will post the link for you. So question, would a tour of a local supermarket that details various employment opportunities be a CBI or a CWE? Answer, it would be a CBI. So while this tour is related to work-based learning, the students are exploring an environment. They're not actually training at the site. Our graduates develop the highest level of competency while in school. We're setting out the stage for their adult lives, basically. Our graduates work towards integrated competitive employment throughout their lives. As you plan, you must consider the rigor of your instruction and strive to challenge the students to work towards the highest level of independence possible. Integrated employment refers to jobs held by people with disabilities in typical workplace settings where the majority of the people employed are not people with disabilities, where the individual earns at least minimum wage and they are paid directly by the employer. Many of your students are going to require supports after they graduate. So in some cases, your students may be supported by the Fairfax Community Services Board, or CSB, and the Virginia Department of Aging or Rehabilitative Services, DARS. You can ask your ETR for more information about both of these funding resources, but they work with adults with disabilities. They provide varied levels of training support and community inclusion. For individuals in need of the most intense level of support, there are day activity centers and facility-based employment that offer pre-employment skill development, meaningful recreation, and life skills training with more intensive support. As individuals develop and demonstrate employability skills and behaviors, they will be encouraged to work in the community and supported employment in either a group or independent placement. As skills further develop, there's more and more instruction in the community, so they may go into volunteer positions or non-paid positions, eventually working towards employment. And you can see these groups throughout the Fairfax community. Competitive employment is always the final goal. These graduates will work in groups and typically have a supervisor who is experienced in instruction and accommodation. Independent placement, initially they will receive job coaching support and then follow along services to ensure their success. We need to think ahead as we develop IEP goals and transition plans. As your students mature and learn, it will be easier to assess the level of support and potential post-secondary options that will be most appropriate for each student as they exit FCPS. This should guide your instruction. If you have any questions about DARS or CSB support services, please contact your ETR. Transition planning helps students work towards his or her post-secondary goals, and CWE will be an integral part of your student's development. Employment is obviously a huge part of any individual's adult life, so work experience starts to be incorporated into community-based instruction in middle school, assuming a bigger and bigger role as the students get closer to exiting school. When you're planning community instruction, you want to think about how much of it should actually involve work experience. Starting at age 14, typically 8th grade, IDEA requires that every student's IEP has to include a transition plan that identifies the individual's post-secondary goals and then outlines what the student will have to accomplish in order to reach those goals in the next year. This plan guides the student's instructional program through graduation with annual updates and fine-tuning. When planning community work experience, we have to identify future work environments so the students have the ability to explore a full range of possibilities and the opportunity to try different types of work. To do this, you will need to identify the student's preferences. Where do his or her talents lie? Is there a specific career, industry, or environment that they would like to explore? Many students who engage in community work experiences are enrolled in coursework that explores options and talents through classroom discussion, direct counseling, and formal and informal surveys. So Naviance is an example of a resource available for this preference identification from 8th grade. So if the student's not involved in work-based learning courses, you could refer to Naviance. Having identified a likely post-secondary placement, we have to decide where we're going to teach these skills that the students will need to be successful in those post-secondary options. So you can create work environments in the classroom, such as balloon sales or a coffee service around the school building. They may work in the clinic or the library or a laundry room if that's available, or in the larger community. We have placements available in retail stores, offices, and restaurants. So there's a lot of different opportunities, and you need to figure out what's going to be the best work environment. Middle school students practice work skills in the classroom and on the school grounds. High school students might start there, but they then, as their skills and preferences develop, they move into the outside community. And you can find suggestions for the classroom and school work sites on the Career and Transition intranet site, and it's under the Community Work Experience link. So there's lists of activities that you can engage in. Generally, any age, you want to start with some classroom activities to assess your students' interests, existing job skills, as well as employability behaviors. So we want to expand to more independent school and community settings as those skills and behaviors develop and become increasingly reliable. And again, we've posted suggestions for appropriate tasks in each environment they're available on the CTS website, which will be listed on the last slide, by the way. Goals are going to apply. So yes, we want to develop skill sets and behaviors for a particular industry or job, but career exploration is the main goal. We want to give our students the opportunity to try different settings and tasks in the real world so they can discover what they like and what they're good at, or conversely what they dislike and found too challenging. So this practice can help inform the transition plan each year as the IEP team is working with the student. The Employment and Transition Representative, or ETR, collaborates with the teacher and team to develop meaningful, individualized opportunities for each student. We need to determine skills that are essential to success in life and in meeting the IEP goals. So if your student wants to explore working as a store clerk or as a computer program analyst, what skills are necessary to succeed in each separate position? Is this a good match for your student? Will the placement require specific instructional strategies or accommodations? Is the development of these skills linked to an IEP or an individualized education plan? Many times, our instruction focuses in on soft skills, which can be generalized into a variety of environments. Does the student need to learn how to greet someone effectively, or do they have difficulty asking for additional assignments when their work is done? Do they correct mistakes and accept criticism? We want our students to practice communication and self-advocacy skills, as well as demonstrate increased independence through the development of soft, transferable skills. So communication, I would prefer not to do it this way. Self-monitoring, I need a checklist for this task. Or punctuality, my bus has not arrived. Review the list of this list on the slide for some ideas of skills which you might want to consider targeting your instruction. Matching your student with a site is critical. You need to select a site where these skills can be developed. Look at an IEP, transition plan, goals, and objectives as they evolve, and match your student to the job site. Maybe the student has expressed an interest in working as a receptionist this year and requested clerical skill development. So if, in addition, they show an interest in working with animals, perhaps working behind the front desk of an animal hospital would be a good match. Maybe they were placed in an animal hospital last year as a kennel assistant, and they decided it wasn't as enjoyable as they thought it was going to be. So, but you may have observed them having an affinity working with older patrons at the clinic. You might want to suggest that they explore this further and set up an experience working with the elderly, maybe at a nursing home or a doctor's office. In some cases, you may need to develop a new partnership to accommodate your student's needs. You really need to listen to your student's preferences when determining his or her community work experience site, and you will want to meet with your ETR to plan and collaborate on sites and student experiences. Of our community work experience guidelines, and it provides you with all of the policy and procedures associated with community work experience. In it, you will also find all of the associated documents that are required for placement. CWE must follow fair labor standards. So keep that in mind. The Department of Labor and the Department of Education have regulations that ensure our students will not be taken advantage of in any training site. So we have to follow age-related guidelines to determine appropriate assignments. So for example, if you have a 15-year-old working in a kitchen, they can't cook until the age of 16. So until that time, until they turn 16, they're limited to cold food prep. We also need to make sure that you maintain records. We want you to log the hours that are spent in the community work experiences in order to, well, we also need you to check their progress. There should be observation reports and performance evaluations. You must see the student and the business partner at least once a month. Many times you're going to, additional visits will be required, but it is based on your student's needs. But at least once a month you need to speak with the business partner and the student. Trainings must be, or the training sites, the primary benefit is training in any placement activity. So we want to make sure that we're not meeting the labor needs of the host and that the student isn't assuming any vacant positions or displacing any employees. Students must be supervised and receive instruction at the workplace, and agreements must be altered if the training responsibilities change. So you need to stay on top of that. Students are not entitled to employment or compensation after an unpaid work experience. Our placements are not an audition for a job, so they're receiving training. Track of the hours. According to these guidelines, our students have to have a documented disability and an IEP. They have to be supervised, and there's an educational plan in place. The hours are limited to 215 hours in any single training position each year. So that's 5 for exploration, 90 hours for assessment, and 120 hours for training. Once the limit is reached, the assigned job must be adapted to ensure compliance. A student may have multiple jobs and assignments in one school year. So it's for this reason that we ask that you keep the data of the time spent on specific tasks versus time spent on the job. We want to make sure that we remain in compliance. We have a series of forms that must be completed by the host, the parent, and the guardian, ETR, and classroom teacher before the onset of a site. This includes the Acknowledgement of Responsibilities form, the Parent Permission form, and the Employer Agreement form. They're pretty straightforward. They're all contained in the guidelines. Any kind of independent placements or if you're going to require job coaching services, we will also need a job coach request form and a LOSA, or a level of support assessment. We also need the student's medical insurance carrier and policy number and emergency care form. And please remember to develop an IEP that reflects the CTS course selection and training goals and objectives. And when the work experience is completed, we need the community work experience summary. Required to have medical insurance in place before they go out into the community. So a parent or guardian must provide the name of the insuring company and the policy number in the parent permission packet. If there is no policy in place, the students may enroll in an insurance program. The one that we use right now is K Insurance Group, which is, there's a link that's listed in the guidelines, and that's through the Student Activities Office. So the link is included in the agreement, and it should be provided to the parent or guardian. A small fee is required to ensure coverage, but you must have coverage before your student goes out into the community. As you get started with the school year, you're going to focus in on the students and what their interest, skills, and training needs are. Hopefully, you will be using an IEP, portfolio, and past assessments or surveys as guidance. You will always be developing and maintaining your community sites, which, by the way, have to be within a 5-mile radius of your school. I want you to patronize your sites and build long-lasting relationships. And we'll discuss transportation in a later slide. You will be able to explore the attributes of the environment and discuss specific considerations. So for example, If temperature is an issue for a student with a seizure disorder, you want to look into that. Maybe a loud place triggers anxiety with one of your students. Listen to your students, look for existing data, and be proactive. You will also need to assess the staff that are working with your students and match skill sets with those environments. So if you have an instructional assistant with a seasonal allergy, maybe the nursery isn't the best bet for that professional. Or perhaps one of your staff members has worked at a bakery before. Guess who's going to the Safeway bakery this year? Relationships matter as well. So if you have a student who thrives with Joe because Joe knows all of his triggers for aggressive behavior, then Joe's going to be the best professional to work with your student and help that student make the placement a success. We want to work together to design programs that will be seamless and effective at the site. So when you get started, you want to get into a routine right away. And transportation is very supportive of our students and our work, so allow ample time for requests, remain flexible, and value communication. When you're planning, we want to make sure that we include attention to the student goals, preferences, and talents. We look at the development of natural supports, the variety. We want to look at data and accommodations. Please follow any protocols that are placed in the guidelines. Be careful to connect to our curriculum, be creative, and use the resources provided like the portfolio and the transition plan. This is going to help you create meaningful learning experiences for your students. And on the job, once you are consistently going to your sites, we want you to keep in mind that you are the liaison and the representative of CTS. We want our students and our hosts to thrive. So this is really important that, we mentioned before, you need to speak with them face to face at least once a month. And if any issues arise, we want to make sure that we're documenting it and that we're discussing it as a team, reassessing, especially if it's an independent site, and we want to make sure that it's appropriate. So please provide support, and it's all outlined in the agreement. You'll see that you have the responsibilities written out, the hours that you're going to be there. Adjustments may need to be made, so make sure you're communicating effectively with the people that you're working with. We also want to maintain the emergency care forms and provide the host with copies of signed agreements. Answer questions that as they arise. You want to be asking them for feedback and respond if there's any kind of an issue. Make sure that you rely on the information that people are giving you, and rely on the people, like I said, the natural support. So make sure you understand what the expectations are, what the standards are when you're given an assignment. So you can ask Abby, the manager, how are you or your student doing? Maybe Abby has some tips for you. And you really need to become members of the team working towards the host mission. You may identify a task that your student can either add to his or her routine or potentially progress to. So many of our students start with something like prepping a document for scanning, but eventually they're able to handle more. They're able to actually scan the document with support, and they are able to, in turn, free up a coworker to complete a more critical task. You are modeling employability behaviors and skills as well, so please reserve using your phone for data collection and keeping a schedule. Make sure that you greet your coworkers and your supervisors as they both come in, and or as you come in, and wave goodbye when you leave. If somebody has a baby, ask about the baby, or if they talked about a chili recipe, ask them how it came out. So in some cases, you're going to be facilitating the relationships for your students, but you're definitely going to be modeling it as well. So establish those relationships. We want to increase, improve, and supplement our students' performances. So another good point is, don't do the work for your student. You are available to support and to instruct. Help your student accomplish the work. Let him or her take the lead when appropriate. We want you to be a member of the business partners team, teach the student to be accurate, personable, remain on task, ask for help, clarify directions, demonstrate stamina and expertise. So the ultimate goal is for the student to perform the job independently without prompts, meeting the employer's quality and production standards. So we want you to increase expectations and decrease the queuing. When we work with a partner, we strive for long-term, mutually valuable relationships. So some of our employers have been working with us for over a decade. To establish and maintain this commitment, we need to remain responsive and consistent. So please encourage a dialogue and address concerns if they arise, and do so in a timely manner. When it's all done, we want feedback too. So please approach your host and solicit feedback from the employer and the student at the end of the school year. The information will be used to improve our service provision with all parties involved. And when it's all done, we want feedback too. Please approach your host and solicit feedback from the employer and the student at the end of the school year. This information will be used to improve our service provision to all parties involved. Evaluation allows the host to communicate his or her professional opinion of the student's performance on a 5-point scale. This provides us with feedback related to the individual's professionalism on the site, including time management, task completion, communication skills, and work ethics. Ideally, this information will be used for future individualized transition goals and objectives. This can be completed and mailed to the school's representative, either the ETR or the teacher. This evaluation requires feedback in the following areas: the appropriateness of the level of supervision provided, the placement's impact on the business, if any, level of realistic expectations, interest in committing to participation the following year, availability of a reference in programming for the future, and additional suggestions for improved execution. We use when we're soliciting feedback, so you can include this if you like. So question, when you reach the cap of 215 hours on a single placement, what do you need to do to maintain your students' training? You need to change the training. So as you carve out a new training opportunity for your student at that site, you will need to have a new agreement in place that outlines their responsibilities, their hours, and their supervision. We do have some new we have some changes and we have some additions. So we have some changes to transportation. We also require a new signature on the work agreement, and we have a statement in the guidelines regarding the use of personal devices. So the principal's signature is now required on all of our CWE agreements. This will increase awareness of your community placements and engagement with your administration. There may be situations that require you to communicate with your student on their personal cell phone using your personal device. Please limit your phone conversations and text to placement, transportation, and scheduling changes. Face-to-face conversations on the site or in the school are preferred. Considering CWE, you should be carefully planning out your transportation. We always want to prioritize having appropriate permission in place when accessing the community. In most cases, students and staff will utilize the FCPS shuttle buses to access the community. But students may need to get to a business before the placement is made and the transportation is established. So they may need to go to an interview or get involved with a business tour. If you're considering driving a student, there are requirements that you have to fulfill. Risk management requires staff to complete an online defensive driving tutorial, which can be accessed at Safe School's website for FCPS. You need to also submit a driver's license check through the DMV for approval, and you have 2 forms that you need to have in place. We need to complete the FS 142, which is the field trip driver's license and vehicle insurance information form, and the FS 152, parental authorization and acknowledgement of a risk for field trip before you use a personal vehicle. So, tutorial, driver's license check, FS 142 and FS 152. Once your student begins the placement, emergencies may arise, so you have to be prepared. The bus may not arrive, or the student may miss their shuttle. Always prioritize the use of FCPS transportation when coming up with a plan. Work with the transportation coordinator, student, and business partner to coordinate alternative plans when necessary. Be proactive and protect yourself. Have contact information for all parties readily available. Please make sure plans are in place and that they are effective, and you need to constantly be evaluating that. Walking. Sometimes our students walk to and from their placements independently. In this situation, we need to evaluate any walking routes that your student may use. This Office for Risk Management, or the Office for Safety and Security, reviews the walking routes. So make sure that once it's approved, you explicitly state that the student is walking on the parent permission form. Students will need to be provided with instructional support when learning the route and observed taking safety precautions and problem solving related to the route. Walking is not a spontaneous alternative plan, and you need to make sure that your administrator is aware of any students who are in the community and have a walking route. So if a student incident occurs in the community, you need to notify your administrator as well as your ETR immediately upon the return to school. So as soon as you get back, let everybody know if something has happened. So, question for you, what changes have been made to the CWE forms this year? Transportation is a little bit more restricted. We've added the principal's signature to the agreement. There's a statement about the insurance link, K&K Insurance, and there is a cell phone statement. So make sure you review all that new information, especially if you have been involved with CWE for a number of years. You can access all of the resources that were listed in this presentation at the CTS site, and the address is listed on the slide. You want to make sure that you refer to this information and contact your leadership team if you have any questions related to CWE placements this year. The Community Work Experience Guideline and the Fillable Agreement, as well as the permission forms, have been updated, approved, and posted on the CTS intranet site. This updated guideline packet is also available on the ETR and WAT Blackboard sites, along with STEP and WAT Google Team Drives. You've completed this training, the CBI CWE training. What step do you need to take to get started? And the answer is on the next slide. So the answer is you need to complete and submit this form. This is the certificate of training, and it can be found in the CWE guidelines packet. It is the last page of the packet, and I believe that Adapted Curriculum has this posted along with the training posting. So you're able to find it in a number of places. Please complete it and submit it to your administrator so they can keep it on file. And remember that you must complete this training every 3rd year. Presentation where I would normally have you post any questions that you have, but obviously it's a recorded session, so feel free to email me with any questions or concerns that you may have about CWE. My email is seaton SEEATON at FCPS. And if not, you can log off and complete your form, and you're good to go for a couple of years. Okay? Thank you, and I hope that you have a meaningful year in the community.